Let's take a moment to settle into our comfortable position, whatever you choose, cross-legged or seiza, or sitting in a chair. It's important to remember that posture in meditation practices is really, it's like one of the first most important things that you have to have right. The posture is one of the keys to getting into the mindful state, and at least it is for this kind of mindfulness training. I know that there are lots of other kinds of practices out there that don't stress the posture very much. Things where you can, lie down, or you can hang out or do whatever you want to do and just be comfortable, and then you can follow someone's guided meditation. That's a sort of a different thing. It's more of a relaxation mode type of practice, and it's actually less of a practice. It's more of just a sort of I guess a de-stress mode, de-stressor, right, type of thing. So I guess some people wonder, when they practice the mindfulness training, why isn't it bringing me any, relaxation or de-stressing? Because I'm, thinking so much about staying straight and following my breath and observing my thoughts and, all of this stuff. And for some people that can be kind of more stressful in a way, So, so it is a practice that's been around for 2,500 years, and it's tried and true and tested, and it works. But you do need patience, and you do need persistence to keep at it, to get somewhere with it, Ironically, that the more you try to get somewhere with it, the more you try to reach some kind of a goal, the harder it is. So in many ways, letting go of our goals, letting go of seeking something from it, actually brings better results. So let's start this morning or this afternoon with a 5-minute mindfulness sitting practice. So let's sit straight. At the very least, keep your back straight and provide your hara space to come forward, okay? That's the reason why the cross-legged position is so effective, because when you have the cushion under your hips, under your butt, and you've got your knees on the floor, it allows the hara to come forward, and it allows the diaphragm to relax and to be able to drop down. So we want to breathe down low. We want to use the diaphragm in our breath. We don't want to be stopping the breath here. We want to let it drop, okay? And that's something that you should look for also if you're practicing martial arts. You should look for that in your martial arts training, experimenting with breath and finding how to drop the breathing down into the hara is very, very important. I'll talk a little bit about that in detail next week at the training. So sitting straight now and shoulders relaxed. And you're going to take the cosmic mudra. A little bit more about the cosmic mudra. People are wondering, why do we have to have this position of the hands, I had a question about that. Why take this position with the hands as opposed to this kind of position or this kind of position, etc.? Well, the hand positions all do actually affect the mind in different ways. And I spoke a little bit about the acupuncture meridians before and how the energy moves through the body. Yin and yang energies have to be balanced in the body in such a way as to create a perfect circuit in the body, which promotes health and well-being. And typically, when you go to an acupuncturist, when they put the needle in, it's usually because they're trying to either stimulate a meridian or they're trying to sedate a meridian to calm it down because there's something out of balance. This lack of balance is what creates either a physical ailment or mental disturbance. So this sitting position comes from yoga originally, and yoga practices, the original yoga practices were combined with Ayurveda medicine or Indian medicine and the knowledge of the chakras, how the chakras and energy balances in the body. So the mudra, the cosmic mudra, the idea of the cosmic mudra is to create a energy circuit in the body using the pyramid shape, which is the perfect shape and perfect stable shape for promoting correct breathing, and then to close the circuit of energy, yin and yang energy, into the body by touching the thumbs lightly, not pressing, but just very lightly touching the thumbs. Okay, so this yin and yang energy then moves freely through the body without any blockages. So that's one of the explanations of the cosmic mudra. There are lots of other mudra positions, as I've shown you, and very complex ones as well. But this is the most widely known. So take the cosmic mudra position, noticing the shoulders dropping down, noticing the chest relaxing, noticing the breath rising and falling in the hara. Don't follow the breath into the body. Just notice the breath moving in and out of the nostrils. Just at the tip of the nose, feeling the breath moving in cool and moving out warm. About the eyes are half closed. We keep the eyes open because we're not trying to go inward. In meditation practice, in this way of meditation practice, there is no inside or outside. There is only what is. These things are not separate. Okay? So just as the body and the mind are not separate, inside and outside are not separate either. So we don't cut off the outside. It's integrated into our breath and into our practice. So that is the posture, the cosmic mudra, the breath, the eyes. Now the mind, focusing the mind on awareness. So what is awareness? Awareness is simply being and residing in the space between thoughts. So it's not thinking per se. Thinking isn't a problem. Thinking exists and it always exists. But awareness is just a kind of conscious idea of being awake, being aware of the space that you're in, but not actually trying to change it or trying to comment on it. Not trying to judge it in any way. For instance, a simple explanation for that would be a bus just drove by my window outside in the city. And I could very easily have said, darn it, that bus is so distracting, you know. That would be getting hooked on the thought of the bus. That isn't really awareness. Awareness is when I recognize that I've seen the bus, I've heard the bus, and there's a sensation arising, which is a sensation of disturbance. And there is then a wish that the bus wasn't making any noise out there. But I've stood back from that. I've been aware that that's what's going on in my mind, but I don't act on it. I don't cling on to it. So this is the idea of awareness in mindfulness meditation. Just not judging, not getting stuck on it, but just being aware that it's happening. And then returning to the breath, returning to that sensation of the breath going in and going out of the nose. So about the word vigilance. So vigilance is a good word. I like this word vigilance because for me, being vigilant means guarding something, something of value, protecting something. So being vigilant as you practice is a bit like when you're a martial artist, when you're standing in fighting stance in front of your opponent, about to practice a particular prearranged move, say a kumite kata or Kyon Kumite number 1, whatever it is, and you're waiting for the first attack. You're very vigilant. You're watching closely. You're preparing your stance. You're preparing your body. You're noticing your breath. You're becoming aware of the entire space around you. So that vigilance, that state of mind of watching and waiting is what we bring to our meditation practice. So what are we being vigilant about? We're being vigilant about the present moment and being truly here in the present moment. What do I mean by being truly here? What I mean is that just as the bus going by the window could have captured my mind, distracted me from my practice, and caused a feeling to arise, and perhaps even have caused a chain reaction of thoughts, right? By being vigilant, I'm protecting myself from being dragged into that. By being vigilant, I am protecting the space where I'm sitting, the mind being calm, the presence of the breath, and the practice itself. So this is the discipline of the practice of following the breath, keeping the posture, guarding the mind, being aware of the space that you're in, Zanshin, and being vigilant of that, every aspect of it. So let's follow the breath and sit quietly for 5 minutes. When you hear the sound of the bell, simply follow the sound of the bell until the sound of the bell fully disappears. And then begin following the breath, going in and out of the nose. Just sit, give yourself permission not to do anything, not to think anything. You don't have to do anything. We're just sitting, that's all. Just sitting and being a human being here with nothing to do, nowhere to go, just being vigilant and watching. So, back straight, chin lightly tucked. Keep your mouth closed and your tongue on the roof of your mouth. Take a deep breath in with me now, and out. Follow your breath. Good. Make yourself comfortable. Shift your position if you need to. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the reasons why we practice mindfulness training and the origins. Just because I think that it's important to know that there are just like martial arts training or music or art or any of these other things. There are different traditions and there are different lineages or pathways of learning where things are passed down from one teacher to another. And some are authentic and some are less authentic, and some are modern and some are old, and some are stuck in old ways and some are modern. um, and that there has been this tremendous acceleration of interest in mindfulness in this last 6 months. I think I think what's driving it is the uncertainty of the pandemic and the radical change that's happening in everyone's lives around the world. And it's understandable that in such a revolutionary change that's happening, it's understandable that people are looking for something to stabilize their experience, to stabilize their life. So even if you look at the origins of Buddhist thought, um, the forms of Buddhism that grew out of India and traveled across the Himalayas and across China and into Japan and Thailand and Korea. Um, each country, each town, each teacher kind of added their own commentary and their own ideas about what the Buddha was teaching. We can't really honestly talk about mindfulness meditation without at some point acknowledging the Buddha. I don't teach Buddhism here. I teach just straightforward sitting meditation practice, which is kind of closer in a way to the Zen tradition, because in the Zen tradition there's less of a inclination to teach the dogma that grew up around the different Buddhist streams of thought, right? And so these different sort of ideas about what the Buddha was teaching all became different kinds of Buddhist practice, from Tibetan Buddhism to Vipassana to Zen or Chan, as it was originally devised in China. So there's many different formats of Buddhism. But I'm bringing this up because I think it's important to note that the origins of all of this stuff goes back to the original goal of Siddhartha Gautama, which was he recognized that there was something essentially wrong in a situation where you could have everything you could imagine you needed in your life. You could have, as he did, you could have a beautiful home, you could have servants, you could have all the food you wanted to eat, all the wine you wanted to drink, you could have, people protecting you at every moment from anything that could happen to you, and yet he knew that you couldn't be protected from disease, you couldn't be protected from harm to your body, physical harm to your body. Everyone has the potential of injuring their body, and you can't be protected from certain kinds of sufferings such as anxiety or depression or just disappointment. Even just a simple thing like disappointment, he recognized that you couldn't protect yourself from those things no matter what amount of money you have. And so he left the beautiful life that he had in his palace. He left his wife and his son, and he went to try to figure this out. And he decided to study absolutely everything he could. And he did all the forms of yoga, and he practiced all the ancient forms of meditation in the Himalayas. He sought out all the great masters in the Himalayas. And at the end of the day, he found that none of them seemed to work. He still had a recognition that there was suffering and whatnot. And so he recognized that there must be some basic practice that could help. And I won't go into this in too much detail, but essentially where we're going with this is the notion of what is reality and what is not reality. And the notion of dualism, or separation of the self from what's really happening. So he recognized that duality was really one of the main causes of suffering for human beings. So what is duality? So we can say that duality is the idea that myself, is somehow separate from this present moment and somehow separate from what's going on out here in the world. That there are two things. There is me and what's going on in here, and then there's everything else out there, right? So this dual form of thinking. Remember, I said at the beginning of practice today that in true mindfulness training, there is no inside and no outside, because that is the kind of dualistic thinking that originally gives rise to all kinds of dissatisfactions in life. So Gautama Buddha, he recognized that there were certain practices in all the ancient yoga trainings that seemed to get one closer to this idea of non-duality, or the ability to reside in the present moment without any reflection or any self-reflection, or at least no judgment of the self. So in this way, he practiced, he set up the framework for sitting practice. And the first, most important, I think, the most important writing that came out of that, those early days of Buddhist training, was the Satipatthana Sutta, which is the book, the very small book that teaches about the four gates or the four foundations of meditation practice, mindfulness training. And those four, I've taught about them before. Those four trainings, or four methods, or four gates, are the body, the mind, the consciousness, and the superconsciousness, or the phenomenon. Okay? So this basic practice of studying the present moment, or getting closer to the present moment by practicing meditations based on those four gateways, is the most basic fundamental teaching of the Buddha. So going back a little bit, where I was talking about how Buddhism traveled out around the world to all of these different countries, and they added all these different sutras and all these different traditional practices and ceremonies, and lots of statues and beautiful temples, and all the usual stuff that happens with religion. All of these layers get added on top of it, and none of that was what the Buddha was teaching. What the Buddha taught was very, very simple, straightforward practice of sitting. So he originally talked about the four foundations of mindfulness practice, and then also the four drivers of practice. In other words, how is it that we are driven to practice mindfulness training? So we can say that we recognize that there is a lot of unconscious stuff going on out there. Unconscious meaning that people are acting out. There's suffering caused because of division, tribalism, racism, sexism. There's all of these things, this suffering that's caused by these things that are bringing to us anxiety and fear and unhappiness. So we recognize that, and we wonder, well, what the hell can we do about that? And of course, there's all of the external stuff that we can do. There's all of the activism, or these getting involved in, all sorts of organizations, and, voting, and all of that's important. I'm not saying it's not, but the second fundamental driver then is how can I recognize this suffering in myself? Do I also experience this suffering, or is it just everyone else? Well, what I do is I recognize, no, I have it too. I'm suffering these things the same way that everyone else is. So first, there's the recognition that there is suffering out there. Second is the recognition that I too am drawn into it by these humanistic things that are happening. And then the third driver is the seeking out a way to get out of that, what's called the karmic wheel, or the just that constant repetitive, you know, one thing leading to another, and then back again at the starting point, which is what karmic suffering is really kind of like. Um, so then we see the suffering, we know that we suffer too, and then we seek out a way to end it. And before we ever arrive at the ability to sit on the cushion and seek it in this method, we perhaps try all sorts of other things, which can include good things and bad things, you know. We may seek out the relief of our suffering through, you know, distractions like entertainment, or, you know, or through entertainment or drugs, or drinking too much, or, you know, shopping too much. Or another big one today is the distraction of social media. You know, getting that somehow also acts like a bit of a drug. It takes our attention away from the suffering and puts it into something else, right? So all of those things are really just, they're just things that we naturally do to move away from suffering. And then, of course, there are the good things that we do, such as eating a beautiful meal, or you know, going to see a wonderful opera, or seeing a great movie, or going down to the water to watch the sunset and enjoy nature. Wonderful, wonderful, more healthy practices for sure. But they're fleeting in their relief. Fleeting in the sense that they don't last. The relief does not last very long. So what happens is we get back on the wheel, and we go through that process of, you know, getting through all this anxiety and suffering and looking for ways to get out of it, and finding the sunset and having some relief, and then on the wheel again we go. So this is the reason why we sit on the cushion, because we know from the ancient practice of 2,500 years that it works in the process of waking up to the present moment and expanding the space between our thoughts, and being able to recognize when we're hooked into that wheel, and just move back a little bit, breathe, and sit and give yourself the permission to claim back your own attention, claim back your own presence of mind, and be a real human being without all of this other stuff getting in the way. Essentially, that's what mindfulness is about, is really becoming like the true human, the original human being. I don't know if any of you have read the Tao Te Ching, but in the Tao Te Ching, it talks about the original human, the true human. It also talks about what's called the uncarved block, or the state of things as they are without interference in the purest sense, right? So our purest state of being is being able to sit quietly, comfortably, and be fully present in what's going on. Like, you know, when you're watching that sunset. But the thing that we seek out of mindfulness practice is the ability to bring the sunset with us in every waking moment, so that a sunset is no different to a rainstorm, to the kettle boiling, to this candle flickering, so that we receive those things and we are with those things, and all those things are just as wonderful as a sunset. We're not trying to stop thinking. We're trying to just become more human and less hooked on the wheel of self-destruction, the karmic wheel. So the practice of meditation is not, it's not going to do you much good if you're not doing it regularly. Okay, you have to build your own practice up. For different people, it means different things. I mean, you could start small and do 5 minutes a day, or 5 minutes twice a day, and build up gradually to a situation where you could sit for 30 minutes once a day, or 30 minutes twice a day. Or some days maybe you only sit once, and other days you sit twice. Or maybe some days you don't sit at all, but you simply try to be conscious of what's going on in your world, fully conscious, fully awake, fully vigilant, walking with the breath, talking with awareness, listening with awareness, noticing when you're getting hooked. That is a very powerful practice, and is essential. That is the practice of mindfulness off the cushion. So you don't necessarily have to be sitting practice all the time. You can practice anytime. Actually walking is great mindfulness practice. The sensation of walking, sensation of moving with the hara forward, practicing your martial art is an amazing way of practicing mindfulness. If you can bring mindfulness to the practice, that's essential. I'll talk more about that next week. But there are four factors that we really need to have in order to build a practice. Okay, a practice of anything really. The first thing is you have to be motivated. Okay, motivation is the first thing. Where does motivation come? Think about the 4 drivers of mindfulness. Recognition of suffering outside, recognition that I suffer, knowing that I want to end the suffering and looking for ways to end it, and then actually ending it through practice. That's the motivation. Knowing that you can get to reality, you can get to the present moment, you can get to being the uncarved block or the true human. That's the motivation. The second thing is the practice itself. Sitting down on the cushion, getting in the posture, following the breath. Okay? The practice itself. Without the practice itself, you can't get there. So you need the patience that practice develops. So number one, you need patience in practice to actually follow it through, even though you may not be getting immediate results. And then as you practice longer, that patience grows. The patience grows and you less and less want to get results. And conversely, the less that you want results, the more results begin to show up. So that's the practice itself. The third thing is discipline. Without discipline, you can't maintain the practice. Without discipline, you can't take the practice off the cushion into daily life. So discipline, it also refers to that word vigilance that I used earlier. I like that word vigilance. So discipline means having the vigilance to be aware of what it is that's taking you off track. That's what it is that's taking you away from practice. What it is that's distracting you. Discipline, vigilance. Okay? And then last but not least is study. Okay, so study. So study, we can say study of the self through the sitting practice, study of the thoughts and the feelings that are arising, study, but also then study about all of the different forms of meditation practice, looking and reading a little bit about some of these things and the history of these things, and um, getting familiar with all of the different voices that are out there. I mean, voices like the great teachers of mindfulness training that are out there. Um, so study is an important part of it, because sometimes when you're studying the different teachers and the different methods and the different um, historical aspects or traditions, you may find a voice that suddenly speaks to you in a way that I could never do, or that perhaps another teacher may not be able to do. It just gets it right for you. And that voice just makes a lot of things come more clear to you. So without study, you don't have that opportunity. So I encourage you to find the books. You know, it's not like it was years ago where you had to go to the library, you had to go to the bookstore to get this stuff. Now it's all over the internet. It's all over YouTube. So many great teachers around. But be careful, because there's a lot of crap out there too. That's when I referred earlier to lineage. It's important to know where people are coming from and that they're not just making stuff up. There's a lot of that stuff out there. That's why I come back to the Satipatthana Sutta, because the basic practice of sitting mindfulness is essentially the bare bones of what the Buddha taught. So it's pure. It's very pure. So those things: motivation, practice, discipline, and study. If you like, I can give you a ton of things to read. You know, in the Vado Academy syllabus, or the Dan grading, they keep rehashing the same books. I don't know why they do that. You know, they're old and they're not very relevant today, and there's a lot better stuff out there. Some new stuff and some old stuff. So there was a question about thoughts and thinking, and this is probably the biggest question people have. It comes up all the time for all sorts of people, and in my reading and in my study, I've read thousands of questions from people and heard thousands of questions from people to different teachers, and this one comes up all the time, constantly. My mind is racing. I can't stop thinking, and even when I'm able to come back to my breath, I still can't stop thinking. And then, like, there's this other phenomenon as well, where you get really good at sitting meditation practice, and you get really good at, taking that step back and being conscious of what's happening in the mind and being able to focus on your breath. And when you're doing the basic counting of the cycles of breath, you're easily able to go to 10 and back and 10. And maybe for the whole 30 minutes, you never lose track of your count. But somehow still, even though you're able to maintain that focus, you're still aware of all the thinking going on, right? And that's sometimes disturbing to people, because there is this notion, or this idea that we shouldn't be thinking, that the goal of meditation is to somehow eradicate thinking. And that's not it at all. Okay, it's not it at all. The idea is not to be caught by the thinking. Okay, that's the idea. I mean, it's the human is just, I mean, we're made to think. That's what we do. We're thinking all the time. It's just that when we're not using our thinking for a certain purpose, then we are wandering into what's called in science default mode network, DMN. So default mode network is a term that scientists use to describe the idling of the mind, or the, like when you're driving a car and you stop at the light and you take it out into neutral and the car just idles. So this is default mode network. Or like on your computer, when the computer goes into screensaver mode, right? And it's just, there's a little doohickey going around on the screen. The computer is just in default mode network. There's stuff going on in the background. You can't see what it is. It's maybe doing a little maintenance back there, and there's all sorts of stuff happening inside the computer, but it's the default mode network. So what happens to all of us humans is, when we're not directing the mind specifically to a goal or to a process of thought, we go into DMN. Now, this DMN is an interesting thing, because mostly what the scientists have found is that DMN primarily concerns itself with two subjects. The first subject is defense. Okay? So in other words, like something is coming up that might actually kill me or hurt me or is a threat to me. Okay? So that's the first thing that the default mode network concerns itself with. The second thing is opportunities. Okay? So what are the things that could happen that might bring me pleasure, or that I might like to do, or that I need to do in order to do something that I want to, like make a nice meal or have a beautiful experience. Opportunities to experience something great, or to do something that helps me experience my life in a better way. So the default mode network, the rambling of the mind, is concerned with threat or opportunity. Threat and opportunity are two ping pong. It's like a ping pong back and forth with the default mode network. And the scientists have found that it is almost like a daydreaming state, where we're going through our life on sort of this sort of co-pilot mode, right? Where we're not really aware that we're driving, we're just in this default mode network doing things subconsciously, and all these feelings and thoughts are arising. And if you really examine, you'll begin to see that the scientists are right. It is either threats or opportunities that we seem to move between in our default mode network. So it's the same when we're sitting on the cushion. All those thoughts that are happening, if you notice what they are, largely they boil down to those two things. Largely. So mindfulness training, if you stick with it and don't try to stop the thoughts, okay, just become aware of the thoughts, notice what they're about, and return to the breath. That in that way, what the scientists have found when they've studied the Olympic champions of meditation, people like the Dalai Lama, or some of these great meditators that have, meditated for hundreds of thousands of hours in their lifetime, where they're able to, what they've been able to do is reprogram the default mode network so that they have diffused the DMN from being those two things of threat and opportunity. Okay? And they've been able to reprogram that default mode network into actual pure awareness. Just awareness of what is going on without the unconscious self-defense mechanism that the DMN brings. I hope that makes sense. When I first read about the default mode network, it made so much sense to me. And it was so interesting that the science behind it was so similar to what the Buddha realized 2,500 years ago about suffering, about samsara, the wheel of suffering, and how that default mode network operating unconsciously within us is leading to so much suffering. So the answer to the question is that everyone is thinking all the time, and it's natural. We're not trying to stop the thoughts. What we're trying to do is stop the thoughts from being DMN, just about threat and opportunity. We're trying to make the thoughts more about pure consciousness, awareness. That's all we're doing. Not trying to get rid of them. But having said that, I will say that if you're aware that you're thinking, that's good, because something's working. If you're sitting in the meditation posture, following your breath, and you're aware that you're thinking, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't judge it. When you judge it, you start to bring all of these other things up, like, I'm not being successful at this, and this isn't working, and all of these different thoughts. No, just follow the breath. Just get in the posture. I can tell you that one of the most powerful things I ever heard, which is from Shunryu Suzuki, one of the great teachers of Zen here in America, who came here in the 60s. He said, there is nothing more to it than sitting on the cushion. Once you sit on the cushion, get in the posture, and start following the breath, that's all you need to do. The rest will happen by itself, as long as you just keep practicing. So if anyone would like to ask a question, just unmute yourself and feel free to do so now.
Hi, Tyrone. This is Srimati. Thank you very much.
Hi, Srinati.
I think, and this may be circular, I think it's critical what you just said that about DMN. And then the whole purpose is to where the veterans of meditation actually try to reprogram themselves from DNM and get into actual pure awareness of what's going on.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more of that, please?
Yeah. So in the 4 foundations of mindfulness, we talk about the body, the mind, the consciousness, and the super consciousness. So when we're in the 3rd gate, go through the 3rd gate of mindfulness, which is the consciousness. In other words, the awareness that we are actually thinking, okay? That we have separated ourselves a little bit from the default mode network in the sense that we're not being sucked into it. We're aware of it going on. That's consciousness. But it's not pure awareness yet. Pure awareness is then the super consciousness. So what is the super consciousness? The super consciousness is pure awareness, as you say. So what is pure awareness? Pure awareness is if I could even explain it, it wouldn't be it. That's the problem. It is that thing which cannot be described. It is that thing which cannot be shown. It is that thing that cannot be taught. It is the uncarved block. It is the no thing.
Okay.
It is the non-dual. It is pure spaciousness. We can't describe it, right?
Yeah, it sounds like what you said. I believe it was in one of the meditations before. It's not something that you can describe with the brain. You just have to feel it at a cellular level. Would you say then that this is almost when you're in the state of bliss?
So we have to be careful because when we talk about bliss, we're already judging whatever that is because we're putting a label on it. And when we say bliss, it immediately on the other face of it is the opposite to bliss. So in that sense, it is already dual. It is already a dualism. So when Chan was developed or was revealed in China, which is the forerunner to Zen, when that was developed originally, it was an argument against the religiousization, if that's a word, of the Buddha's teachings. It was a revolution back to the beginning of just sitting. And when it moved to Japan and became Zen practice, or shikantaza means just to sit, okay? The purpose is to remove all the labels, because the more garments that we put on, the more layers we put on and labels we put on, like suffering, like bliss, like in, like out, like inwards, like outwards, like all of these labels, they drag us into the default mode network again, this process of threat and opportunity. So I think it's, in one way we can say that Kensho or nirvana or the result of sadhana, you know, the beautiful blissful experience that comes from chanting or, you know, or getting closer to God or, you know, all these things. I'm not saying that those aren't true. But what I'm saying is we have to be very careful that we don't allow those terminologies to get in the way of pure experience that cannot be described, that cannot be taught, the no thing, the non-dual. Okay? Beautiful question, by the way. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I think that made my day, actually. Anyone else? Okay, so let's wrap it up for today. Let's do a short sit. We've run over time a little bit, so I understand if you have to leave, that's fine. But such is life. And I'm just going to get my timer set here for 5 minutes sit, okay? Let's get in our position, whatever you position choose to be in. Remember that the posture is everything. The posture is pure intention. Without the posture, we're not getting in through the first gate of the body, okay? So it's very important. Follow the bell, the sound of the bell, until the sound of the bell fully disappears, and then begin following the breath. Straighten your back, tuck your chin slightly, half close your eyes. Become aware of the room around you. Relax your hara, relax your shoulders. Feel the weight of your body in the cushion. Take a deep breath in now. Follow your breath. Follow the sound of the bells until the sound of the third bell fully disappears. And that will bring our meditation for today to a close. So I wish you well on this Saturday, and I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Thanks to Mayumi for her question on thinking, and thank you very much, Srimati, for your question on awareness and on bliss. So remember that practicing mindfulness meditation is not just about sitting on the cushion. In the discipline of practice, as I mentioned, we need to bring the practice to our everyday life. So we can do that by just stopping for a moment every day at different times of the day and recognizing our own state of mind and recognizing our breath. In this way, we can become closer to the present moment and what's really going on. I encourage you to do some study and also to expand your experience of mindfulness meditation through speakers on YouTube or podcasts and all sorts of other things. There's such a plethora of stuff out there. There's no reason not to expose yourself to it and deepen your experience. So let's bring our hands together in the non-dual form of the Gasho. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day and enjoy your weekend.